100%. So on that topic with, centralized figures manipulating numbers, I know you've been pretty vocal as well about like, unemployment rates, which I saw the unemployment rate now is I think at 4.3%. That doesn't account for government jobs added. You look at CPI, CPI is now 2.9%. I know you've been very vocal about that as well. Do you kind of want to like let the audience know like your thoughts on those two specific numbers? Because I think those are two pretty key metrics that seems like they're pretty manipulated.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And you got your finger on the pulse, man. You're spot on here. And all these numbers, the most important numbers that we're using, which is CPI and unemployment and manufacturing and GDP,
Mhm.
all of these things, when you properly account for CPI, are signaling that we are in recession and we have been in recession. And a lot of people probably don't know this because they don't remember or they haven't studied it. I'm just one of those weird finance guys who likes to study the history of finance. Well, if you go back to the Great Recession in 2008, well, it's just like it was now. In 2008, they were publishing news articles about how strong the economy was. And it was later on, it was in hindsight, right? Hindsight is 2020. They didn't get it right when they were in the heat of the moment, and they went back and they revised the data and they figured out, whoa, this problem really started in 2007, right? So
Yes.
it's like 2009, and they're like, well, 2 years. I think that's what's going to happen this time. They don't think they're waiting too long, but they have waited too long to lower the rates. The demand destruction worked, and the Federal Reserve came out raising those interest rates to destroy the demand of the economy, but they're not accounting for inflation properly. And what that means is that the analysts are mistakenly accounting price increases or inflation, prices going up because of the dilution of the dollar, as economic growth. So if price increases are going up 10%, you have to deflate GDP. You have to properly take away the price increase that's the result of inflation in order to see if there's any real economic growth. And when the government says inflation is 3%, but you go back to their 1982 version, which your listeners can go check out govflation.com, we've done that. We go back to the pre-substitution equation, and that's what we use according to them, right? Nothing to do with me. This is their equation. The government paid to design this equation. Let's just go back to that because it's more accurate. We're over 10%. So you're talking from 3% to 10%. That's a 7% difference. So if they do not deflate GDP properly, they're going to mistakenly think that the economy is strong because they're counting that 7% of inflation as economic growth rather than inflation. And that's where all the confusion is coming in because real GDP says the economy is strong. But that's because you're deflating by the wrong deflator, which is not the same as CPI. The deflator doesn't have imports, but the same BS is going on, and they're understating the real price increases, which creates artificial economic growth. But then when you look at those other metrics that we talked about, unemployment, um, manufacturing, manufacturing has been in a bear market since the end of 2022, which matches up with real GDP when you properly deflate it. And unemployment, now I have to say, my cup of tea, my what I'm really good at is inflation. I don't think anybody's going to teach me anything about inflation. I'd love to learn something, but I've studied it long enough where I understand it in and out. I've just started digging into unemployment. So, fact check me and message me and teach me something because I'm willing to learn. But what I learned was that unemployment is actually worse than inflation. So my fears came true because I figured, oh, it can't be that bad, but it really is. It's even worse than
Mhm.
bad. And they went from using U6 to U3, and it's the same manipulation. It's a change in methodology. And let me say this too, because a lot of people right now in their head are saying, well, the data is real, CJ. You're right. The data is real. It is a miracle that the government collects all of this data from 300 plus million people, aggregates it together, and then shares it with us through API. Thank God they're able to do that. It's probably the only thing the government does right. Well, it's the methodology of them taking that accurate data and plugging it in to an equation that alters the state of the data, which then alters the outcome and conclusions that can be drawn from the data. So the data is accurate. Thank you for sharing the data, but your methodology is wrong and it's skewing the data. And now you go back to unemployment. Unemployment is actually at 7.3%. 7.3%. And people think it's at 4. People think, it went around, the SOM rule went around the other day, right? On the X, like, oh, it got triggered, got triggered. Everybody and their mother started posting about it like they're some expert. It was
Mm-hmm.
hilarious. I love how that
Mm-hmm.
happens on crypto Twitter. Everybody becomes a
Mm-hmm.
doctor, everybody becomes a lawyer. Just great. But the
Exactly.
fact of the matter is that triggering has never been wrong. That triggering has never been wrong. And I saw some people come out and even say, well, the reason it got triggered is because there's so many illegal people coming over the borders. And I said, okay, that's an interesting take, but it's really just an excuse because it has 100%. People have been coming over illegally the borders for a long time. This is not new. It's just that now it's getting really bad and there's more than usual. But it's been going on for quite a bit of time. So none of the results are going to be skewed because there's been no real change. It's just now that the problem is worse. And when you look at unemployment and you say 7.3%, some rule triggered, we're growing at 5 point, half a percentage point year over year. This is the point where the Federal Reserve should be lowering interest rates to support the economy, but they're not. And that's because the data is manipulated through the methodology and is sending out false signals. And if we could just get them to understand, that's the question. People, do they understand it? Do they get it? Why are they doing it? I'm sure I know you saw my CPI tweet. Like, if the government kept CPI methodology the same, Social Security payments today, instead of having an $1,800
Yes.
average, would have an $11,400 average. Well, there you
Yes.
go. That's just one example of how the system is incentivized to misstate the rate of inflation. There's many other examples, but all those incentives create corrupted results, corrupted data analytics, which then leads to these people who are in charge making the wrong decisions at the wrong times. And it's been going on and on and on and on and on. It's not like, okay, well, can you get it right this time? What are we on? Like, we're going to like QE5, QE6. We're going to keep
Yes.
going and
Yes.
going and going.
Yes.
This is not QE1. This is not
Yes.
QE2. It's the same thing over and over again. And that's the definition of insanity, when you do the same thing and you expect a different result. What's different this time? We have Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the bailout
Mm-hmm.
of we the
Yes.
people.
Yes.